which is right. Moshe's been talking the whole Dvarim basically. I mean, he's been giving us a lot of his view of the world, and we'll get into that in a minute. And then he's winding down at the end. I mean, we're really the next few parshas are very short, and it's getting to the end of the Torah now. So he starts off this sort of last little unit of what he wants to say with a very beautiful scene. Atem nitzavim hayom kulchem lifnei Hashem Elokechem. You're all standing here, right in front of Hashem. Rashechem, Shiftechem, Ziknechem, Neshotrechem, Kol Ish Yisrael. Right, the heads of your tribes, your elders, your officers, everyone. And then, right, he not only does he include that group, but he then even makes it more expansive. Tapchem, Neshechem, Megercha, Shebeker, Machanechem, Mechote, Veitzecha, Vad Shoev Neimecha. Right, from children, women, even people that the people that live amongst the Jewish people, from the woodcutter to the water carrier. All right, so he sort of starts off with this very expansive list of people that are part of it, and then he jumps into his point, which is so that he's going to bring them into the covenant of Hashem. All right, and from there he goes on to discuss, what he sort of expects from them, and how they're part of this group. They're all part of the Jewish people, and they're all accepting to follow the rules of the Torah. All right, so that's the introduction to this parsha. So what I want to do now is sort of go rewind a little bit, okay, and go through some of the other aspects of Devarim, and I want to share with you a very nice idea, and then we'll come back to our parsha and see how it's sort of all culminating in this parsha. All right, the book that I was looking through, it's a very nice book. It's called Ad Hayom Hazeh. It's written by a guy named Rav Amnon Bazak, who teaches in Gush Etzion, in the Har Etzion Yeshiva. I think he teaches more in the Tanakh section. But either way, so basically what he's doing in this book is he's going through a lot of the contemporary, let's say, methodology of how they're learning Tanakh, mostly in Israel. I'm sure there's people in America doing it, but mostly in Israel they're doing it this way. And it's sort of a blend a little bit between traditional way of studying Tanakh and more academic approaches. In other words, they accept all the traditional beliefs that God gave the Torah to Moshe at Har Sinai fully, completely, and they accept that basic premise, but then they also try to use more modern methodologies to try to interpret the psukim. So it comes out with some very nice, innovative ideas. And this book is basically a review of what they've accomplished in the last 40 or 50 years, however long they've been doing it. Okay, now Devarim is obviously one of the big, is going to be one of the books that benefits the most from this, right? And I feel like we've talked about this throughout the last few weeks, but Devarim of all the books is, even in traditional sources, we know that Devarim has a different status or a different perspective than the earlier four books, right? Because the earlier four books are told from God's perspective. Right? In other words, it's God he's speaking through Moshe, but he's speaking directly, so to speak, right? Whereas in Devarim, it's Moshe, there's more of Moshe personally himself in there. Okay. So one of the things that he talks about in this book is, again, this I think is, I don't know how popular it is. He makes it seem like it's popular, but it's called Shitat HaBchinot, right? Which means that there's different perspectives in the Tanakh. All right. And this comes from a guy also an Israeli professor of Tanakh. His name was Mordechai Breuer, and he's part of the Breuer, from Samson Raphael Hirsch's family. There were two of them. One of them was a historian, and one of them was a Tanakh professor. So the Tanakh professor had this notion, right? It's a very, very important notion that there's different perspectives, meaning there are times within the Torah when there's a contradiction, which is intended to be there. Okay, it's not intended to be resolved. It's not intended to be explained away. But the contradiction itself is important because it lends more color and it lends more depth and nuance to our experience of the world, right? And that's the way it is in general. Whenever you're dealing with great literature, so it's not just surface, right? It's not shallow. It doesn't just tell you what to do. It sort of creates the nuance and the conflict. And that helps us be able to see the world a little bit better. So he said that the same thing is true of the Chumash. There's these built-in contradictions that are meant to be there, And the point is to give us more nuance and more depth as we're studying these ideas and these concepts. All right, now the reason he said it is because of a more technical issue having to do with biblical criticism and whatever. He's trying to deal with more technical issues, but I don't want to go in that direction right now. I mean, we could talk about it another time because there's a lot of interesting stuff there. But I just want to say on a more basic or more, let's say, fundamental level, right? Forgetting about any questions or attacks, let's say, on traditional Jewish beliefs, that is true in and of itself, right? When you read through the Chumash, so there are these different perspectives that are explored in different ways, and that's better for us, right? We wouldn't want to just read. Imagine the Chumash was just a simple book. You just read through it and it just tells you do this, do that, right? It would lose a lot of the depth that we associate with it because there's all these different layers. Okay. Now that said, what I want to tell you, I want to share with you one idea that he mentions as part of this, and we'll see that it's a nice explanation of the Chumash, and it also is a very important idea for us. All right, one of the contradictions, one of the, let's say, big contradictions that's a problem in the Chumash is that there's a prohibition to like cut yourself or shave your head when someone dies. All right, so people would get very upset, and I guess back in the day maybe, or even nowadays maybe, people sometimes would like cut themselves, right? Or they would cut their hair, they would pull their hair off. So the Torah prohibits that. The problem, though, is that in two different places it mentions this prohibition, okay, and it phrases them differently. Okay, so in Vayikra, okay, now Vayikra, right, and again, right, this is from academic, let's say, studies. We know Vayikra, but it's also obvious that way. Vayikra is a book that's very focused on the kahuna, on the kohanim, all right, on these special, the special group, the special tribe that was chosen to serve in the Beis HaMikdash. And Vayikra focuses a lot on the special rules of the Beis HaMikdash and the service and the clothing and all these sort of special things that happen with the kohanim. All right, so now in Vayikra, at the beginning of Parshas Emor, it starts off, Emor al kohanim b'nei Aaron. Say to the kohanim, the children of Aaron. All right, it's talking about all the things that they have to do. One of the things it says is lo yikrachu karcha berosham upas dekanam lo yigalechu. Right, that they shouldn't cut their hair. Right, with saram lo yisratu saretas. They shouldn't shave their heads or their sideburns and their flesh. They shouldn't cut. Okay, so that's where it says that. It doesn't say anything about anyone dying. Right, it just says, and it's also talking about the kohanim. Right, that's how it says it over there. So it's talking to the kohanim that they shouldn't do this, and it's saying, and it doesn't mention anything about this being in the context of someone having died. Okay, let's go to Devarim Yud Daled. All right, now here the Torah again. Here the Torah again revisits this issue. Okay, and it says the following: "Banim atem l'Hashem Elokechem." You are children to Hashem. To Hashem, you're the Lord. Lo sisgodedu v'lo sasimu karcha b'neinechem lameis. Don't shave your heads and don't cut yourselves. Don't cut yourselves and don't shave your head. Don't shave between your eyes over someone who died. Okay, so here, first of all, it's talking to everyone, right? It says that it's talking about the person who died, and it talks about on the forehead, right, in this area, like in the front, between your eyes. Ki am kadosh atah Hashem Elokecha, because you're a holy nation to Hashem your God. Ubecha b'char Hashem lios lo la'am segula mikol ha'am asher al pnei adam. And Hashem chose you to be His. Well, actually, let me not rush through that. Sorry. Let me read that verse again, because that's going to become important in 2 minutes. Ki am kadosh atah Hashem Elokecha. You are a holy nation to Hashem your God. All right, so that's the explanation for this commandment is because you're a holy people. And you, God, chose to be His special people from all the nations that are on the land. Okay, so that's the interpretation that the Torah says over there. Okay, so obviously there's right, as I just pointed out, there's some serious contradictions between the way these two laws are formulated, one in Vayikra and one in Devarim. So this is, this was not discovered 20 years ago. This is an ancient issue. And the Gemara basically says, right, which is the standard way that the Gemara answers, the Gemara says that we take the word karcha, right? The same word karcha appears in both of them. And that creates a connection between both of these. So that teaches us that, in other words, we can take what's said in Vayikra, we can take what's said in Devarim, and we can combine them through this word karcha, which is Gzeira Shava. Now, when you have the same word that appears in both places, so very often you can that the Gemara will say that you can combine them. So that's how we know that it's talking about everybody, right? It's talking about in other words, it's not just talking about Kohanim, it's talking about everybody. It's talking about however exactly the Gemara puts it together. Right? It's talking about, in other words, it's talking about the whole head. I can actually read it to you for a minute. Yeah, here I'll read you. Okay, right? I only know this about Kohanim because anyways they have a lot of extra mitzvahs. So how do you know the Jews? So nemar kan karcha v'nemar lahalan karcha. It says karcha mach kan chayv kol karcha v'karcha v'chayv al rosh kebein ha'inayim af lahalan chayv kol karcha v'chayv al rosh kebein ha'inayim. Right. So just like over here, it's saying that in the rest of the head you're obligated, not just between your eyes. Right. It expanded the whole head, and anywhere that you would shave, you'd be obligated. So we put that also in the other place, meaning the in Dvarim where it limited it to just between your eyes. It's not right. We use Vayikra and we say that it's the whole head. And umalaholan al mes afkan al mes. All right, just like over there, it's talking about over a dead person, so too over there. Okay, so the Gemara combines them like that. Okay, and that's what we would expect from the Gemara, that it would combine them. Okay, the idea that this Rav Amnon Bazak suggests, which I think is a phenomenal idea, and it's based a little bit on the Ramban. All right, the Ramban in Devarim makes a similar comment to this. What he says is that using this notion that there's different perspectives in the Tanakh. No, sorry, before I get to that, I just want to point out this doesn't disagree with the Gemara, because the Gemara is talking about on a halachic level, right? How do we know what the halacha is? We have two verses in the Torah which contradict each other, which have certain contradictions. So how do we know what the halacha is? So the rabbis in the Gemara are telling us what the halacha is, that you take this Gzeira Shava. They have a tradition that you can connect these two passages, and that gives us the halacha. Nobody's disagreeing with that. All right. In other words, that's the halacha. But we're still left with the question: why does the Torah present it in this awkward way? Right. Good. Very good. We now know what to do practically. But why does the Torah give it in this awkward way? Why not just say it outright? Just say it the way it's supposed to be. Right. Why are you putting it in Vayikra differently than Devarim? So that's where this idea comes in. And again, it's based on the Ramban, because he himself in Devarim points out that what's going on here is something very, very beautiful, which is that Moshe is effectively saying that all of the Jewish people have the status of Kohanim in certain ways. Okay, now what does that mean? So the way I guess I would formulate this is that a religion is going to have certain people that are, let's say, set aside, right? People that spend their whole lives in spiritual pursuit. Right, that's the way that a religion. That's just the way religions function. Right, you can't have everybody spending all day in the whatever doing religious stuff. Right, people have to do stuff in the world. But on the other hand, you got to have some people that specialize. Right, like anything. Right, people specialize in all sorts of things. So somebody's got to specialize in the religion. So the same thing is that the Torah is accepting that perspective, and that's the view in Vayikra. All right, there's Kohanim and they're specialists. Right, they're endowed with a certain sanctity. They have the sanctity of being Kohanim, and they have this special status. But what Moshe is saying in Devarim is that not only the Kohanim have that status, but the whole Jewish people have that status. Okay, in other words, there's an irresolvable difference here. Okay, it's not something, we're not trying to make sense of these two things. It's true that all of the Jewish people have this status, this sanctity like Kohanim. But on the other hand, there is still something special about Kohanim, right? It's a contradiction. I'm not trying to logically explain it. There's going to be Kohanim, and they have a special status. But on the other hand, all of the Jewish people, Moshe now tells us, also have to live this sanctified, elevated life. Okay, so that's exactly why Moshe chooses to present it when it comes to Devarim. Right? In other words, in Vayikra, when God was saying the law, so he said Kohanim have to act in a special way. And that's true. That never changes. Kohanim, more than other people, have to act in a special way. But what Moshe is doing in Devarim is he's sort of giving us the other view, which is that all of the Jewish people have to act like Kohanim. All right, and I'll give you one more example just before I want to explain this a little more, because I know I sort of just said it. I want to explain it, but I just want to give you one more example, which also it just illustrates the same thing. All right, again, in Vayikra, where it's talking to the Kohanim, so it says, again, in a similar case, it says, Nevela utrefa lo yochal l'tama ba'ani Hashem. All right, it says that they shouldn't eat like animals that weren't slaughtered properly or just died, right? The laws of kosher. But there it sounds like it's talking to the Kohanim. Okay, when you get to Devarim, okay, so again in that chapter 14, right, it says Lo sochlu kol nevela. All the Jews can't eat nevela. So again, right, we have the same thing playing out again, right? Right, you could either give it to a non-Jew or you could sell it to a non-Jew. Okay. All right, so again, we have the same perspective playing out, right? In Vayikra, it makes it sound like the laws of kosher are a special law for Kohanim. And then Moshe comes around in Devarim and adds in everybody's part of it. But what Moshe is really doing is he's saying that all of the Jewish people have this sort of sanctity, which is to the Kohanim. Okay, now I want to add in two things which he in this book basically mentions. Okay, and that is like this, that, right, what's going on over here? In other words, this is all good and nice, right? We have a contradiction, Kohanim are more sanctified, or everybody's sanctified, right? But where did this all come out of? So he references a pasuk, right, before the Jewish people get the Torah. So this is a famous pasuk. This is in Shemos in Perek Yud Tes. The Torah, and Moshe says to them like this, Atem ra'isam asher asisi l'Mitzrayim, right? You saw what I did to the Egyptians. I carried you, right, on the wings of eagles to me. If you listen to my commandments, and you keep my covenant, then you'll be a special group, right? You'll be my special people because I own the whole land. You will be a kingdom of Kohanim and a holy nation. Okay, so what does the Torah itself already articulate here? Right, it already articulates the distinction here, meaning if the Jewish people live in elevated life, then they have the status of Kohanim, all of them. Right, if not, so then the Kohanim sort of have it endowed, the other people don't, but the whole Jewish people can access that higher level of Kedusha, that higher level of sanctity by living according to the Torah. All right, so that's exactly what Moshe is getting at, in Devarim. In other words, he's telling them these are the laws in Vayikra, and on some level they only apply to Kohanim who are endowed with this sanctity. But then he's really backtracking from that, and he says, no, all of the Jewish people have that sort of sanctity, because if they follow the laws of the Torah, then everyone is endowed with that sort of Kedusha. Okay, now the other thing I also just want to say over here, which I think is a very profound idea, is that this is one of the big issues, right, that we read about in Bamidbar, right? No, I don't want to be jumping all over the place, right? But this is the major issue between Korach and Moshe, right? This is their whole fight. In other words, Korach says, why are you making this status, this distinction in levels? Now, Moshe's right in that battle, but right, in other words, even the Torah gives you the impression that maybe Korach had a point. He maybe should have said it differently, he should have expressed himself differently, but he had an important point. Right, and what's the answer? In other words, what happened as a result of that? So Moshe gives, let's say, the laws of Vayikra. I don't know if it happened in this exact chronological order, but when we read through the Torah, Moshe gives the laws of Vayikra, right? And he's elevating the Kohanim. Korach comes and he says, "What are you doing? Right? Why are you elevating one group over another? Right? Everyone's holy. The whole Jewish people are holy." And now Moshe and Devarim sort of recasts a lot of the rules that he gave based on this notion that everybody's holy. All right, so I think it's an unbelievable idea. And I just want to add on, and I'll get to Rosh Hashanah in just a minute, but I just want to add on, this he didn't say, but I think this also is a very nice reading of our opening scene in Nitzavim, right? Because in other words, one of the major points of Devarim is to backtrack on some level from the impression that we might have gotten earlier in the Torah, which was not wrong. Again, right? This is the key point that these guys are trying to say, that it's not a wrong impression. There is an elevated status to Kohanim. There is more sanctity, that Kohanim have, whatever that means. All right, it's not wrong. It's just a different perspective. They both can coexist that all of the Jewish people can also be a Mamleches Kohanim, a kingdom of Kohanim. All right, so I think that's maybe part of what's going into here, right? Atem nitzavim hayom kulchem, that you're all standing here. In other words, as Moshe gets to the end of his speech, so he reiterates that the whole Jewish people are sanctified, right? There's no, right? That's the whole point of this speech, that there's no real divisions, right? Everyone, men, women, children, the highest, the lowest, right? Every person is sanctified. And so that's how he opens up the scene over here, right? It makes perfect sense now at the end of this whole long speech. And let me just end with, I said I think this connects to Rosh Hashanah. I think it's probably obvious how it connects, right? But it's a very beautiful idea to go into Rosh Hashanah with, because sometimes we lose sight of this. It's a simple idea, right? It's an obvious idea. We know that the Jewish people were given a job, that God gave us a way to become more sanctified and to become more elevated. But in the course of life, right, it gets busy. All sorts of things distract us. And a lot of times we can lose sight of this very simple, fundamental idea. But it's really a guiding force in our lives. And, as we start the new year, this is our last Chumash year before Rosh Hashanah, before the new year. But as we start the new year, it's a very, very important idea to incorporate into our lives. Each of us has the potential to access this tremendous Kedusha that Moshe is talking about. Right? We talk about, Kohanim, and we all understand that they have a special place. And certainly when the Beis HaMikdash was there, these were people that were able to serve in the Beis HaMikdash, to bring sacrifices. Right? They were able to create a tremendous amount of sanctity in the world. But the truth is that every Jew has that ability. Right, and that's what Moshe stresses throughout Devarim. That's what he stresses with this Atem nitzavim hayom, that every person is part of that community, a part of that nation, of building that sanctity in the world, and every one of us is part of that covenant with God. So, hopefully this year we can, every year, hopefully we're growing, and hopefully this year we'll continue that and infuse our lives with even more Kedusha, and to be able to spread that even more to the world. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi.